Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV therapy and coaching services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have our 9th episode of season 10, a very special guest and success coach expert, Robert Moncaster. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Robert, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan, Dr. Dan. My name is Robert Moncaster. For the last 25 years, I've been primarily involved in the debt collection industry. 1996, I had quite a turning point in my life, a catastrophic car accident. And what that inspired me to do was to learn more about myself, learn about my behavior, and learn why did my brain change? What changed? Being a brain injury, I couldn't put my finger on it. So it really caused me to dive deep. And, I experienced people saying, you look fine, everything's good, you seem normal. And so I didn't feel like anybody understood what I was going through, because on the outside, I seemed to be functioning. And so I was challenged by that statement of, you look fine, everything's fine, you speak fine. And so, it really struck me that people didn't see what was going inside my brain. And so what that inspired me to do is to seek education. I studied psychology. I studied the brain function while I was going through my rehabilitation, and really just took it upon myself to better understand, I guess, how I function, and, what was causing me such strife and such mental anguish. And so gratefully, self-taught, going through that, I've been able to thrive as an entrepreneur. I've bounced back, and I'm here today to definitely inspire and perhaps share my story, so that I'm sure other people see some similarities and grow from it.
Well, I'm sure that they will. And thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be able to join us, Robert. So what kind of, like, when you went through the accident, the car accident, and you went to a coma, how long were you in a coma for, and when did you wake up? Did you lose memory? Did you lose a lot of ability to function properly? What happened?
I believe I was in a coma for 3 weeks.
Okay.
I wasn't consciously there. So I believe it was 3 weeks from my recollection. And, unlike the movies where, somebody just, the fingers snap and now they're out of a coma. I had a Glasgow coma scale of, I think, 4. And so what coming out of a coma was, it was a gradual process. It was a gradual reawakening. My mother was there, and kind of a hidden gift, or an indirect gift. She got to witness me behaviorally changing from when I was, 1 month old to back to 19 years old when it happened. And so she actually watched me grow up, and my behavior and my mannerisms. And so, going through that, coming out of the coma, it was a very frustrating time. I was just filled with emotions, and I was hitting my arm against, trying to get the cast off, and hitting my arm against the concrete wall, and really being angry and frustrated, trying to figure out what changed, what was going on. So yes, the coma, it was 3 weeks, but it was a gradual, gradual, like a reawakening.
Yeah, I see. And after that awakening, what brought you to wanting to understand more about the human brain, how the psychology behind it, what really brought you to become the person that you are today? Was there some awakening that said, I need to learn more about that specific topic, or you were just always curious to go and learning about psychology?
I've always been naturally curious, through, I was when I was born with bilateral club feet. So the doctor told my parents I would never walk. And so I've always been a fighter. And I never really walked into that doctor's office. I ran. So I've always been a hungry learner. And so when I was going through this process, what frustrated me, what really got me was, I would be around friends and they would talk about, oh, remember this time, and remember we were doing this, and I was blank, and I was frustrated by, what's wrong with me? Why can't I remember these? And what's the point of remembering? And so I went to a library and I took out a psychology book, and I learned what episodic memory is, long-term memory, short-term memory. And what I discovered is my episodic memory was diminished. And so episodic memory is like the episode. What color is the walls? What was the weather? All the different minute
Yeah.
details. And so learning that what seemed like my episodic memory, it was diminished, I quickly formulated a strategy of, okay, understanding long-term memory is facts, patterns, figures. And so I committed to, whenever I wanted to remember something, I consciously converted it from an experience to a fact, a pattern, a figure. And that's how I started really rehabilitating, was when I just shifted gears with my memory, not relying on my short-term memory, and more leaning on my long-term memory.
And so you remember the event of the accident, but not the details around that accident? Is that correct? Or you still are
No,
like,
no. When the accident happened, I lived about 3 minutes away from Royal Columbian Hospital in British Columbia, and that is the neurological center hospital. That's where everybody in the province goes for traumatic brain injuries. And so I lived a couple minutes walk from the hospital, and so most accidents, as they say, happen within a very close proximity of your
yes,
home.
correct.
And so, God's grace, I was in the exact right spot when this happened. So an ambulance was there, 3 blood transfusions. Honestly, I don't remember what happened in the accident. I remember going back to where it happened, walking and just staring blankly, and just, what happened. And to this day, I can only rely on what other people have suggested.
You've mentioned before the recording of this podcast that doctors will give a very grim diagnosis to your parents about the potential of you losing your life. What was exactly those details?
So when I got to the hospital, I was losing blood, and my parents, they asked my mother, they got there and asked her to identify me, and she said, that's not him. And my eyes were, filled with blood, and she couldn't really see much, and I was very inflated. And what they realized when she said he's not that big, they realized that I was bleeding internally,
Oh,
and I was having I had a perforated bowel from the seatbelt, and I believe they put me on morphine, and they quickly realized I was allergic to morphine. So in that process, the doctor told my parents that there was a 95% chance that I wasn't going to make it.
whoa, okay. And what was the process of recovery afterwards, Robert? I mean, from the time that you left the hospital to the time that you became 100% functional, what was the time in between?
I would say it was a 6 months, 7 months. I remember, because I lived so close to the hospital, and my best friend lived in the same apartment building. He lived upstairs. And I remember I was in a gown, I was in hospital clothes and a robe, of course. And I remember walking down the street and going back to his place and having coffee with him. I used to go upstairs and we used to have coffee all the time. And it was just the drive for me to go back to a normal routine, back to a routine that I believed I knew. So I remember, not sneaking out, just walking out of the hospital and going and having coffee. And I knocked on his door, and he's like, what are you doing here? You should be at the hospital. Do they even know you're gone? Like, what are you doing? And that was I remember specifically, that was the start of me just, showing and just driving forward. After I was released from the hospital, I was at my parents. I was sleeping 18, 19 hours a day as my brain is healing. And I remember being at my parents' house. I was in my sister's room. She had just left. And I, out of, sleeping that much and being awake a couple hours a day. I remember my mom coming into the room and saying, you know, I talked to your dad and we both believe that you're going to be the most successful of our children. But we don't think you're going to live past 30. And I was 19 and I just took it as like, how could you say that? And, you know, and I just took that as an opportunity to just go home. I said, I'm leaving. I don't want to be here and I want to go home and I remember my apartment, I wanted to move a different apartment. And this is, you know, within months of this car accident, within weeks of me leaving the hospital. And I remember my landlord said I could move to this better apartment, but I had to paint. And so I had a broken collarbone. I had a cast on my wrist. And one of those spot weld moments of that time was I remember pushing against the roller with my cast and painting, even though I was sleeping 18 hours a day. And, you know, it was just persisting and just driving, not knowing, not realizing there was an alternative. Just I got to move forward. I have to survive.
And when did you decide to become a success coach?
So my accident happened in September of 96. In July of 96, I was introduced to personal development. So I took my first personal development course called The Pursuit of Excellence. And, you know, I've always had as a child, I sold chocolate bars when I was 12 years old in front of banks. And I was very entrepreneurial. And I have a gift of the gab.
Okay.
And I simply love helping people and seeing people improve their lives based on, you know, me interacting with them and seeing a pivotal change. And, you know, I don't think there's any greater feeling as a human being than helping other people and affecting change in somebody's life.
I so agree with that statement, Robert. So for our listeners, what would you recommend for those who actually went through a very traumatic experience, either an accident such as yours or a sickness or whatever it is? What would be like more of a practical approach for them to be able to start taking control of their life and not have that victim mentality? Because most of them do have it and they stick with that mentality and they never really progress in life. So how do you get out of that zone, if we could call that?
Be clear on what your purpose, what, you know, how I really moved forward was being clear on my purpose. I think, you know, Dr. Frankl, he created the School of Logotherapy, and what he believes, and I truly agree with it from my experience, is therapy through purpose. I think if one has a clear enough destination to get to, these speed bumps in life, they aren't as significant. And I think once, you know, if just have that clear goal in mind, and I from my experience, you know, these little ripples in life, they don't affect me. I'm too busy going in this direction. I don't have time to stop and complain about or worry about a speed bump. You know, and I think that's the greatest thing that I learned, was just be focused on my destination. And, you know, just like driving a car, how many of those signs on the side of the road do I remember when I was so clearly focused on getting to where I was going?
Frankel, is it the guy from the Holocaust that saw all the people die around him and that made him want to move forward and still stay alive?
Yeah, so he was a psychiatrist before he was interned at Auschwitz,
Yeah.
and he was a psychiatrist. And his goal, his purpose, his vision was that he was going to see his family, that
Yes.
he was going to bring his family back together. And so that was his meaning. That's what kept him sane in these such egregious circumstances, and it allowed him to focus on helping other people, and you know, speaking with the other prisoners, the other people there. And so, yeah, it made a huge difference for him. And when he got it, the book is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
And when he got out, from what I recall, he found out that his family had perished. He had lost his family. And he went on to build the School of Logotherapy in Vienna.
Okay.
And logotherapy is therapy through meaning. And, you know, that's the importance of it being clear on purpose and having a direction, because once I have purpose, you know, these seemingly in the moment significant events are a small blip. They're not important enough to stop. I'm too busy getting to where I'm going.
So, okay, so in your case, you had a vision, you had a purpose, as you mentioned, but those who have got everything in life and they've lost everything, now, when you had something and you lose it, recreating another purpose, because maybe sometimes you feel that your past was not really your calling. Maybe you want to redirect your past in your present into something different. So how do you reboot your mind to be able to allow that new purpose to enter your life?
Being clear on purpose and then taking small steps towards it. However tiny this step is, once I start moving in that direction, then, I start, other things fall into place, and I start to see a clear path.
Okay.
I think the most important thing is to just take action, just regardless of what insignificant or however seemingly small that action is, just do it. Just move forward. I think I believe in time travel in a sense that any experience that I've had in my lifetime is in my memory. So whether it was in the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean sun beating down, and my feet in the sand, and experiencing the aroma, I can go back to that moment at any time, and it will actually cause the same chemical reaction in my body as when I was there. And so if I'm in a moment of strife, of anguish, if I'm conscious enough, I can go back to, I mentioned Dominican, which is a spot weld moment for me in my life. And I can go back to those moments and I can re-experience it. My body doesn't know that I'm not there physically. It's giving me the serotonin and all the endorphins, and I actually feel like I'm there. And so, I think that's been one of my greatest saving graces is being able to time travel. And I know it's a far out there sense of or a suggestion, but it's completely possible in our mind. It's so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And have you, well, how long did it take you after the accident to get back into driving? Because I know a lot of people, they're too afraid to go back and face like another vehicle and the potential, possibility of getting back into an accident. So how long did it take you to go back into a car?
I believe it was a year and a half. And so when I was going through my rehabilitation and I couldn't drive, I had a vision of getting an Acura 1.6. They were pretty new on the market, and I thought, oh, an economy Acura, this is great. I can drive an Acura, and so I remember looking at pamphlets and seeing this Acura, and I lost vision in my right eye from the car accident. And so I didn't know if I could get my license. And so I hesitated. And then I just decided to go into the driver's services, and I told him, I said, I was in an accident. I don't know if I can drive. I don't know if my peripheral vision is sufficient to be able to drive. And they said, no problem, just do a test. And so they put me on the peripheral test, and I could see the light flashing in the right side. So I had enough vision to see the light flashing. And so I was able to pass the peripheral test, and they said, no, you can drive, go ahead, no problem. And so, I was able to drive. And then I remember driving, I was in Victoria, getting off the ferry, and it was dark, and having a different depth perception, not no depth perception, but
Yeah.
different, terrified me. I thought I was driving into a wall the whole, like, as I'm driving, I just
Oh,
kept seeing like there's this wall right in front of me. And it was just, just my mind playing tricks on me. I just laugh and say, there's no wall. There's a road. It's fine. Just keep going. Just don't worry about it. And over time, um, I adapted to it. Over time, it was, that's the way it is. And I don't need to be afraid of something that's not there. It doesn't exist. Why am I projecting that it's there when I know
you
better?
regained the vision of the right eye, or is it complete?
No, so the hood went through the windshield, and it poked my eye. So my retina detached, it destroyed my lens. So I've got what they call get by vision.
Okay.
So I've got maybe, 5-10% vision. It's very blurry. It's like looking through a stained glass wall from, 50 meters away. It's
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. Wow. So now in your success coach practice, how do you help people, go through those difficult times or those difficult challenges? Because obviously everyone has a different story. So it's hard for when you go into a group and you present your services, etc. It's hard to be able to pinpoint what everyone is going through. So do you do like something more generalized so someone in the audience can actually capture that message and it may affect them in a particular way?
Well, I provide a bit of foundation. Great question. Thank you. So I do provide a bit of foundation, namely my definition of happiness.
Okay.
And to me, happiness is to be without mental anguish.
Okay.
And so, it's laying a bit of a context of why we're here. And then, I think the most important thing for people that are going through um, turmoil or apparent trouble is to just let them speak.
Mhm.
What I learned going through my car accident, when people were saying, you look fine, everything's great, there's nothing wrong with you. Oh, everybody's like that. Everybody's memory, just listen. When I speak, whether it's to a wall, whether it's to another person, my brain hears it and I allow it to process more instead of having it bottled up. Just speak it out. And then my brain can hear it auditorily through my ears. So I'm hearing it from a different perspective. And I have an opportunity to say, well, that's not really like that. It's, and then I can start to process it. I think the most important thing for people, for anybody going through a tough time is to talk it out. And if you have a great listening friend, or if you have somebody, or if you don't, talk to a wall, because it's therapy. It allows me to process it from a completely different angle. And, I think the best people in my life are the ones that I can just speak, and they don't throw their opinion. They actively listen. So they ask questions to pull it out without offering their subjective ideas towards it, because it's not their experience. So how can they ever relate?
That is so true, Robert. Absolutely. Now, we all know that happiness is not sustainable. So, in your own personal life, how do you keep yourself happy? What kind of like daily practices do you put in to be able to at least keep a normal level, not too much of the highs, not too much of the lows, but kind of like a cruising speed?
I enjoy um, reading, current events. I enjoy reading a book, and I make sure I don't get myself too consumed in what's going on for me. With the challenges I have in my business, or the day-to-day operations. And, I make sure that I give myself time to be outside of myself. So I keep the monkey chatter in my brain down,
Okay.
because, if I'm just quiet and solid and feeling a bit of anguish, they're just screaming in my ear, and I can choose to focus on it. One of the things that I'm not a hugely religious person, but one of the things most repeated in the Bible is, and so it came to pass. And to me, that statement is so powerful, because regardless of how challenging the circumstances in the moment, if I can snap out of it for just a second and say, and so it came to pass, I know that there's going to be an end. I know that it's going to be a blip in the radar eventually, and simply just keep moving forward.
So obviously, like we all know that, the when it rains, after the rain, there's the sunshine. So you know that after this certain bad time that you're experiencing, you will see sunshine eventually. So a lot of people, like when they're in that dark tunnel, Robert, they fail to be able to see the end. I mean, the light at the end of that tunnel. They feel that there's no way to be able to have a good sense of direction. So when someone comes to you and they're going through like financial distress, what kind of advice would you give someone, especially when it comes to money management? Those who actually are overspender, those who are too frugal. How do you, like? I know you said that you're more in the financial side, right, for the success coach. So tell
Right.
me about, or tell the listeners about, what kind of like advice would you give them when it comes to managing their money, especially in this inflation period?
Well, I think it's important, from a financial, is how you do anything is how you do everything, Dr. Dan. And so how I go through life is how I treat my finances. And for me, having a goal, and it's a roadmap. Where do I want to get to? Where am I now? And what steps do I take in between to get there? I think, again, it comes back to purpose, having that end goal in mind, and really believing it, feeling it, tasting it, touching it, seeing it, smelling it, like really, really picturing myself at that goal, what it is, that's the most important step, besides taking an inventory and saying, okay, where am I now? I think one of the biggest travesties is the term "what is isn't." I think, the fear of the unknown, the fear of worsening, these are crazy negative drivers for me, for humans. And so just knowing where I want to get to, and then taking an inventory where I am now, somebody in a dark tunnel that doesn't see the light, you know, my I guess my advice would be just keep going. You're going to make it. You're going to get there. But on the same token, I think it's so important to, take an inventory and listen, where are you? And what's the worst that could possibly happen? What's the best that could possibly happen? And I think once, I get the shades off and I can actually start seeing a little farther ahead, that fear of worsening, that fear of the unknown becomes a little more comfortable, because I've already dealt with the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and where I'd be happy. I think we're very powerful. Our mind is incredibly creative. The definition of pay attention. What is that? Well, to pay attention is to exert mental energy into the physical to manifest it. So whatever I'm paying attention to, I'm exerting this powerful energy and I'm going to create it. And so what am I paying attention to? Am I paying attention to, Eeyore, it's going to rain? Or am I paying attention to the rainbow after the rain? Or, what am I paying attention to? What am I speaking? What am I, listening to my dialogue when I'm speaking with people? That's a great indicator of where my headspace is at. So, I think it's just being conscious of where I am and where I want to get to. And I think the means take care of themselves in between.
I'm sure that in your practice, you must preach the laws of attraction. Or do you believe in that thought becomes the things that you think about? Or is there like a lot more involved to be able to, obviously, we know that you have to have the belief and action, because thoughts cannot just become things if you don't have those two ingredients. So in your practice, how would you tell to the listeners, and that will be the last question, to be able to kind of like apply those laws and you'll be able to see some great results?
One of the great lines I've heard is, speak what you seek until you see it. And so, yeah, I do believe that our mind is incredibly powerful. And I think what I put in my mind, the picture in my mind, is what I'm going to create.
Mhm.
And so if that picture in your mind is not working for you, then you can always change it. You can always, whether it's a vision board and cutting out magazines and seeing pictures of where I want to, is it the beach? Is it, and just paying attention, putting out the mental energy to the physical world. Whatever I pay attention to, I expand.
Mhm.
And so pay attention. I think that's the bottom line, is pay attention, and pay attention to what you're paying attention to.
Mhm. That's so good. And so if you could tell the listeners, where can someone find you? If someone's going through some distress right now, how they can find you, either on social media or on YouTube, whatever it is.
You can find me. My email or my website is robertmuncaster.com. That's the best place to start. Send me an email. As I said, one of the greatest gifts in life is the greatest feeling in life is to help another human being. And so if there's anything that I can be of service to, please don't hesitate. Send me an email, and I would love to share whatever gifts it is that I've been given.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Robert, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 10 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit will help you finish and polish your stories. Inspiration won't. Habit is persistence in practice. So if you feel inspired by this message, then you're on the wrong track, as my words mean nothing if you don't change your habit that will change your circumstances. You must apply what you get inspired from to make the changes needed in your life. If you're eager for a better life, start by implementing your goals and dreams and not leave any stones unturned. You're in full control of what you listen to every day. Yes, words can help. Inspirational episodes such as this one can take you to the next level. But if that new level do not help you in taking affirmative action towards your goal, these inspirational episodes, such as this podcast, are simply worthless. So go out there, grab life by its horn, and tackle it to the ground. If other successful people did it, you can too. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.